There's 10.
All right. Hey, everybody. Thank you for coming and joining us on our Ask ATC live stream today. It's going to be a lot of fun, and we hope that you enjoy it and provide us with some questions that we can ask our friend here, Matt Wells. But you know us here, and the reason that we're really doing this video is because our most popular video is seriously how to talk to air traffic control. We know it's intimidating. We know it's hard to do, and we want to help you guys through it. So Matt Wells, who I already kind of said his name, is here with us to talk about it. He is an air traffic controller, and he has the channel The Flying Controller, which also means he's a pilot. So Matt, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, first off, Carl, thanks for having me on. I'm Matt. I have a channel that's kind of restarting. It's The Flying Controller. I am an air traffic controller at Fort Worth Meacham International Airport in Texas. Fort Worth, obviously. I've been doing it for about coming up on 10 years now. I started off in the military, and then after that, I was done. I went to TME down in Houston for about 9 months, and then I came up here. And in the middle of all that, I went learning how to fly and got all the ratings and working on CFI at the moment. And the first thing I want everyone to know is that all the words I say are mine and my own. They do not or may not reflect the views of the FAA or any other agency out there. So keep that in mind.
That's a very, very good disclaimer.
It's required.
Yeah, no, I'm the same way, because unless we are looking it up inside of the FAR AIM or some other official documentation, it is our opinion until we do
Correct.
that. So,
yes, sir.
Okay, so let's go ahead and just a reminder to you guys, we really want to hear your questions about this. There's so many things we know you guys have questions on. I get hundreds of comments asking questions on how to talk to air traffic control, so we know that you have them. So please type them in the comment section and we will go through them. But I'm going to start this one off by asking Matt, hey, what is it like? What's the day in the life of an air traffic controller?
Well, it starts by obviously going to work. It depends on which facility you go at. So just a quick start off, there's 3 facilities in case anyone doesn't know. There's tower, there's radar, and then there's center. And they all have different manning, and they all have different a different mission essentially. So I'm in the tower, and I go to work, and most of the time right when I get to work, I go straight to working tower or ground, or just being CIC in the back, which is controller in charge. And we have, before COVID-19, we had about 3 to 4 people per shift, and we would rotate out through the positions throughout the day, breaks, 30, 45 minutes. And then we would just, I'd start off on tower maybe, and then go to ground, go on a break, and then go on ground, and then go to the CIC and just rotate around, got to get proficiency and currency in all these positions. And yeah, it's 8 hours is a normal work day for me in the tower, and it's normal for most controllers. I've heard that some in New York are on mandatory, 10-hour days, 6 days a week. Don't know too much about that, but that sounds like a lot of work. And it just rotates out for me in the Class D. And then after 8 hours, normally I go home. If for something happens manning wise, they can ask me to stay for an hour or 2, but I can't go over 10 hours. 10 hours is the absolute max, and within a 7-day period, I have to have 1 24-hour period off. So okay. The potential to work 60 hours a week is there. It doesn't happen very often, at least where I work.
Okay. I was just going to say to everybody here that most towers will do tours. You just have to give them a call. And if you haven't gone on a tour, I highly, highly recommend it. It can teach you a lot of what an air traffic controller goes through on a daily basis, how they're handling the different airplanes in the airspace, how they pass them off from ground to tower and even out of the airspace. And so there's a lot to be able to learn. So you just have to call them, set up an appointment. My tower says, give us 24 hours. You can call today, be there tomorrow. So definitely take a look at that if you haven't done it yet. So we've got one question here. I think this one's going to be fun for you, Matt. I think Eli K. He says, as a controller, what is the most annoying thing a pilot could do?
So let me answer that a little, diplomatically. Annoying is not the best word I would use. But if I had to put it into context for you, the most annoying thing that, in my opinion, that a pilot could probably do is just go rotate in an airplane and not know what the heck you're doing, because it makes my life difficult. It makes everyone else flying around's life difficult, and it basically puts you in a position that you probably shouldn't have gotten in the first place. And I've had a few of those, and I'm not just talking about the aviate navigate part. I'm talking about aviate navigate and communicate part.
Yeah.
And we can see these things, from the tower. I can see these things from the tower. I've seen people rotate on a calm day and they're doing this, and I'm like, is everything all right? Yeah, we're good. So just being on point when you go up there, or if you're not 100%, maybe you should ask yourself if you really need to be flying, or bring a friend along. Crud, I've flown with so many friends around me that a lot of them just ask me, hey, just can you fly with me just so I can work on comms, or so that you can do comms and I can listen. And I'm like, sure, whatever you need to do, I'm happy to help. There's only so much I can do from inside the tower. In an airplane, I could help as well. But just being on point, mainly with communications when I'm working tower, because I can't fly the airplane for you.
Yeah.
And
No.
to second that on communications, it's not verifying if you're supposed to be doing something, or saying Roger or Wilco, but you didn't really hear what I said, and you're just going to assume what I said, and then you end up somewhere that's bad. I've had that happen a couple times recently, and then I went back to him and I said, "What the heck, man? I asked you to go here. You said Wilco, and then you went over there." He's like, "Oh, I thought you said this." So didn't exactly hear me 100%, and affirmative knowledge, I know exactly what they want me to do.
And I would say that's a situation where you should definitely repeat back the instructions instead of just saying Wilco or Roger. That's something that they do in our airspace, particularly because it's so busy. They want to know you heard it properly. They make you repeat it. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Readbacks are key. Readbacks will save your life.
Now, a quick comment on readbacks. Flight Chops released a video a little bit ago where he was in a training session and he was given a laundry list of things to do before he could do his readback. What do you do in a situation like that? Do you just patiently wait, or is it kind of a annoyance?
So, I'm trying to remember if I saw that one or not. I watched most of his stuff. Was it a laundry list of things like airplane-wise to do or communication-wise?
It was airplane-wise stuff to do before he was allowed to respond.
Okay, so here's what I would recommend for that. I don't know who the CFI was or what was going on. Please don't do that. That's not the best thing to do. When you talk to a controller, I'm assuming that you're ready for a read back, because it's like you and me having a conversation right now. You speak, I read back, and it just goes back and forth. Same thing on the radio. I've had students get out on my runway, clear for takeoff, and they get clear for takeoff, and they do their pre-takeoff checklist on the runway.
Ooh.
No bueno. So get everything done, everything that you can possibly do before you call ground, because when you call me, I'm under the impression that you're ready to move. You're ready to go. You're not going to call me and then sit and do your laundry list of items, wait for a readback or whatever. I can understand if there's a few things happening in the cockpit that you can't get back to me right away. I mean, I'm a pilot as well, so I've issued clearances and then there was no readback, and then a minute and a half later, I'm like, and then the pilot calls me back and he's like, "Sorry about that. We just had a little, something going on in the cabin. We just had to take care of it." I didn't find out what that was, but I don't know. Maybe somebody was getting sick or something. They were still on the ground. So it's 6 or 1/2 a dozen. I'm not going to jump in your stuff too much about it unless you're actually flying and I need you to do something. But have your stuff ready. Have your stuff ready before you call us. Try to have it all ready before you call us on arrival. On departure, you're on the ground, safe and sound on the ground. You have plenty of time to do all the stuff you need, checklist-wise, and just have it done before you call us. Especially if you're trying to get out of a busy airport like Deer Valley or even Meacham on some days, and you're like, "Okay, we're ready for departure," and then they're like, "Clear for immediate takeoff. Got a Cessna on the base," and you're like, doesn't work. So just be ready.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to hear your perspective on that, because we're seeing different sides of things here, and it's an interesting conversation. So, all right, here's another question from Anthony. Oh, it just moved. Anthony, where are you?
Oh no.
Here you are. Should a GA pilot that's not flying a jet or high performance airplane ever use Class B airports?
Should a GA pilot that's not using a jet or a high performance airplane use Class B airports? I mean,
it's a weird question. I know
that is a slightly weird question. From a controller's perspective, I wouldn't know because I don't work at Class B airport. But if I would say, I would definitely assume that if you had a need to go in there, then why the heck not? If it's a public use, B just means it's busy. They can work you in if you have a legitimate need to go in there and land. They can't deny you. You know, they may have you keep your speed up until short final, which is hard to do in a 150. But I mean, at DFW, they have this ball that goes on every year. A lot of the GA guys, they jump over there for the ball thing, airplane ball. I don't know what it's called, but they all small GA airplanes down to 150s. They fly in and land at DFW, and it's for a reason. So I mean, if you're like, I just want to visit DFW, should I go land at DFW? Well, I mean, if you want to, you're going to pay fee after fee after fee for landing there. I think it's like $75 to touch the ground at DFW. And then I'm sure that your overnight fees are going to start racking up. So is there a need? You answer that yourself. Class D airports work just fine, or even non-controlled fields in some cases.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say is that you should really be doing your research on what airport you're landing at, because some Class B do charge landing fees to be able to land there, and sometimes it's based off of air traffic and how busy things are, and they want to keep smaller aircraft out that don't actually need to be there. But some airports, like Phoenix Sky Harbor that I'm close to, actually has a smaller runway for GA aircraft. And so there's no landing fee for you to go land there. There is an FBO fee, a ramp fee is what they call it. But, you can still go do that. And if you haven't flown into Class B, there's no landing fees, and you want to try it, now's a good time. It's not really busy out there because flying into Class B can be a little bit different. And I don't know terribly too much about it, but when I flew in, a handful of times I've done it, I was tossed to 4 different controllers on approach. So
Class B is busy.
Class B is busy. There's reasons that they do that, but practicing that, so if you ever have to go land at a Class B for a legitimate reason, would be good to do. So do have an interesting question, and I don't want you to answer it for you personally. I want you to use your general knowledge of this one. As an air traffic controller, what are your wages like? What do you get paid?
So it's not necessarily, in my opinion, thing. That's one thing you can go and Google and you can see, and it's based off of levels. So levels, air traffic levels start from 4, and that goes by volume and complexity. They go all the way up to 12. So I can't think of a level 4 off the top of my head. Meacham is a level 6, and DFW is a 12. And so you can go look those numbers up online. I don't know what the base is off the top of my head, 60 or 70. But then you get a few things extra on top of that for working at night, on Sundays. If you're in charge, if you're training, you get like little percentages on top of the base, and then overtime's obviously on top of that as well. But yeah, you could Google that, air traffic pay band, and you could see it differs by it differs by the area. DFW has a 30, 28. I forgot the percentage. They have a locality rate. Houston has a higher locality rate because it's more expensive. California, Los Angeles area has a higher locality pay. So there's a base, and then there's it's kind of like an extra for the area you're living in, because some places are dirt cheap to live in, some are not so dirt cheap.
Yeah. Okay.
So
great. All right. Here's another interesting one, and also, everyone, COVID-19 times, you may hear my children inside of the background. You may hear my dog in the background. I'm sorry. But we have another question from Eli. And this is a good one. And it's something I definitely want to discuss tonight. It has to do with phraseology and the things that we say or don't say. And he says, as a student pilot, me along with most other people, I say Roger when needed. Is Wilco actually necessary instead of Roger? In your opinion, which one works, which one's better, or when should you use each one of those?
Okay, so student pilot. Okay, so let me start off with, if you're a student pilot, I would highly recommend that anytime you talk to an air traffic controller, you say student pilot. So November 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, student pilot, north of this airport doing this, whatever. Do your 5Ws, like Carl likes to say. But say student pilot. Moving to the question, the Roger and Wilco. So Roger means, okay, that's all it means. Stand by means, okay, I heard you. I'll get back to you. Wilco means you will comply. So if I tell you runway 16 clear to land, Roger. Okay. I mean, that works, kind of. You know, I may read it back to you just so you read back to me, runway 16 clear to land. Because if you say Roger, you know, it's like, okay, I have 2 runways, and you could definitely end up on the wrong runway, and that's actually a trend right now. Wrong surface landings is a trending thing since this COVID thing started. So Roger doesn't really work for that. You know, for clearances, Roger doesn't work. If I'm giving you information and stuff, like say you're transitioning through my airspace, and I'm like, you know, okay, transition approved, altimeter's 3015. Roger. I don't necessarily need a Wilco from that. A Roger would suffice, or you could read it back. I always encourage everyone read back exactly what they're told, so that way everyone's on the same page. But Wilco is you're going to comply with something. Roger means I just heard it. So I guess it varies on the instruction that's given, and the necessity. You know, like I said, clearances. You know, clear for takeoff, clear to land. Wilco, no. You know, turn left base in 2 miles. Wilco, that would be an okay one because I can visually see if you're going to do it or not, and I can call you out if need be. But yeah, don't forget your call sign in that as well.
No, that's an interesting topic. I remember there was times where I would say something and I said it properly. Air traffic control maybe didn't pick up part of it. Someone may have stepped on the call and they wanted me to clarify. And every time you talk, you should always use your call sign or close with it at least, so that because it's being recorded. And just like I say in my video, you know, there's rules and regulations. Air traffic control has their own set, and they have to make sure that the pilots are doing their set because it's all recorded. And if there's a problem, we need to go back to that to see what actually happened. So yeah, they make you say it. And I have been sitting there once where I repeated something 4 times because I was flustered because I wasn't using my call sign each time. I was just answering their questions. Yeah, no, don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that. I've had a few people do that, and I said turn base, and one of them, both airplanes turned base instead of one, and they weren't reading back their call sign. Same exactly what you just said. And I'm like, you don't do that. You do this, and you know, it was just a little bit of Blue Angels, but they were separated.
All right, we are getting some good questions in here. Here's a fun one. Halo Gaming, that's fun. What are military pilots like? So I would assume that he's asking, you have maybe a military jet coming in. Is there a difference with working with them?
So from when I was in the military as a military controller to now, military pilots, that's kind of a broad question. Most of the time they're on point with stuff. Their flight instructors do not let them go farther than they need to, which is another tip for some of you people that are flight instructors. They are pilots just like the rest of us, so they can make mistakes, they can screw up, they can do the wrong thing, but I mean, I don't know. That's a pretty broad question. If there's anything specific on that, then, but for the most part, they're just pilots. They're just flying bigger and faster things and more American things.
Okay. All right. Here's a question from Yuri, YURI. And I'm going to go ahead and take this one because, we kind of talked about this just before we went live. ATC for a lot of people, they're scary. They sometimes will talk fast. And how can you improve my hearing skills? I would say it's not necessarily improving your hearing skills. It's anticipating what air traffic control is actually going to say. You're flying in, you're inbound, or you're on the ramp. You've already got the weather information. You know what direction they're going to tell you to taxi to, which one way they're going to tell you to, and you can be prepared. And that helps with your hearing skills because now instead of listening for instructions, you're listening and double checking what you thought was correct. Now, that's not true if they're giving you a random instruction or telling you to deviate from a normal plan. That's when you need to have the listening skills. And if you don't hear those, my favorite ones are, if they're going too fast, say again, slow down, or unable, please repeat. things like that definitely help. What would you say to that, Matt?
So,
and you can tell me if I'm wrong.
Carl, no.
Oh.
I'm thinking back to your first video with the 5Ws and all that other stuff. Some people like to use craft when they're writing some stuff down, or some people like to use a few other things, for anticipating those clearances. But you're right; they could completely come at you at a different angle, and they could completely throw you off. So here's my recommendation from being a controller. There's liveatc.net. Very awesome resource to listen to, especially if you're bored at work with this COVID stuff. You can listen and just get the jiffy of things. There's also an app that I'm not endorsed by, but I've seen it, and it's called Plain English, and it's a great little app to get your communication skills going. I mean, that app will tell you if your voice quality stinks, and voice quality is a big thing, because if I tell you cleared to land and I'm all good about it, confident, and you're like, cleared to land, I'm like, oh great, he doesn't know if he's really cleared to land or not. But you just gotta go. It's practice, practice, practice. The live ATC thing, I've heard a lot of people like to listen to that in their off time or whenever, and they pick up on things, and they hear all kinds of random things. I mean, there's only so much a ground controller could do, or tell you to do, or ask you to do. There's been a few non-standard things that I've had airplanes do, because on Meacham, if I get any bigger jets in there, I pretty much have to stop everyone for the jet to pass, because it's just got smaller taxiways. So I may ask you to make a 180, exit at a taxiway, do another 180, and then wait for the plane to pass, and then go back on. That's kind of a big instruction. And we controllers mostly know if we're going to give you something other than non-standard, like for example on the ground, then we'll do our best to read it out slowly, and then make sure that you read it back. And if you're confused on it, you just ask, and there's not really any problem. We know what the basic instructions are. If we have to deviate from that, we're normally slow. We're normally gonna make sure you get it, and if you don't, then we'll work with you. It's not just gonna be like throwing you out something like that whole taxi thing I just said and expecting you to hear it and do it right away. But anyways, sorry, I go to ramble a little bit. Liveatc.net and Plain English is a great little app.
And I was going to give another little chime into Plain English. I actually collaborated with the owner of Plain English, talked with him, and learned how he built it. And it's very, very interesting. And it is a very, very good, strong app to help you learn. My wife is currently doing some pilot training, which some of our viewers know it's been a small struggle getting her started, but we're getting there. And in our Talking to Air Traffic Control 2 video, I had her use it to show people how easy it was to get started and to start learning how to do it. And literally within 5 minutes of using the app, she was making the calls properly. Yep. I mean, it helps so much. So if you guys want to go watch our Talking to Air Traffic Control video number 2, it's in there. You can see how the app works. And in the description, there's actually a discount code if you wanted to purchase the app to help you learn a little bit more. So definitely check that out. I'm going to link that inside of the comments as soon as I give you your next question. So I don't know how to say this person's name, so you try pronouncing it. Dion Elgerman? Yeah. What
qualifications do I need to become an air traffic control? Okay. So there's a couple different ways you can tackle that. If you're in the United States, at least, that's all I know about. You can go via the military, like I did, and you'll be an air traffic controller for 6 years is the minimum if you're just joining. And they put you through schooling, and they make you go get certified. You could even deploy, go to Korea, I went to UAE when I was in. They may send you somewhere else. That was always fun. On the civilian side of things, in the U.S. of A, there's going to the FAA Academy, which you have to apply to usajobs.com or .gov whenever a bid for a zero experience drops. You can apply to that. You got to get all your stuff together. I don't know what the minimum requirements are off the top of my head, but you have to have a good working background, a good background history. And then 3 years of work experience, and a few other things. And you could try to tackle it that way. And then once you get that ball rolling, they'll have you take a few tests and make sure you're a good candidate. And then, assuming they're satisfied, they'll move forward. And they say controllers, we're losing controllers left and right. We're actually starting on the back up on the upside of that trend, but we're still, I believe they're still in need of a couple thousand. So
would you
those are a
say
couple
it's a high stress job?
I think it varies. How do you handle stress? I mean, most of the people
True.
watching this are probably pilots. So in the cockpit, you have a good amount of stress. Added stress for if your family's flying with you. Added stress if you're flying an IFR by yourself. Air traffic controller, as an air traffic controller, the stress, I've always managed stress pretty well. So I don't know, if you don't think that you handle stress well, I could run you through some basic things that would make you think twice if you wanted to be one or not. But in the FAA, there's a lot of controllers that were pilots previously, and they got in and they're controllers now. I started as a controller first and then became a pilot, but it's not that stressful to me. I enjoy it. I especially enjoy it when I have like 5 to 7 in the pattern, itinerants, people asking me stuff on clearance and ground. That's when I enjoy it the most. So
yeah, I guess it's different for everyone. It's like directing an orchestra. Some people really enjoy that. So
I don't mind one bit. If flying an airplane is stressful, then work on flying the airplane and not stressing so much. Then try to be a controller if you try to go down that route. But
awesome. All right, I've got another good one here from Nathan. He says, I was issued a low altitude warning from the tower, even though he was in good altitude position, in his opinion. What tools do you guys have to look at stuff like that? And that's an interesting question, because I've been told that myself too. And I go over and I look at my transponder and I'm at the proper altitude. So
ATC, most facilities have a radar, and that radar is based off of a system that tells controllers where the MVA is, which is minimum vectoring altitude, and the minimum vectoring altitude is because of obstacles for the most part. Could be for other reasons, mountains, obstacles, anything that may or may not get in the way. So if you went into ATL and in a 172 and you may have thought, I'm at a good altitude, and then they said low altitude alert, it could have been because maybe you got too low for that area or below the MVA, or it could have been, it's basically the system, the radar system, normally it blinks and it's in a little alarm that says LA on your call sign, or your tag as we call it. And when it beeps LA, it means that the radar has detected that you're going below a safe altitude for your position. So it beeps at us and we say low altitude alert, November, whatever, check your altitude. MVA is this, and it could be a MOCA, MVA, a few other things.
Okay. Do you guys have any tools that utilize ADS-B right now?
I believe it is tied into the same radar system. In the tower, we don't really mess with it too much. I think there's an option to, but I haven't really used it yet.
Okay.
So I think the radar guys know how to turn that on and off like that. But in the tower, we don't have it really turned on. But yes, to answer your question.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't know what the tool or anything was. I know that some towers are starting to get it. I know mine has it. Just coming inbound the other day, there's 3 or 4 of us. We all tend to come down the highway for some reason. It's a really great visual reference straight into the airport. And there was one person not on frequency, and he was calling that person by tail number. And that person broke into the airspace without request, made a 180, flew about a mile north, and then called tower. I will tell you, he got an earful.
Ouch. I actually had that happen to me the other day.
Well, and why don't you talk about that? Like airspace, like when are you allowed to go into different types of airspaces, and what happens if you, we'll say, breach that?
So if the viewers aren't familiar with the requirements for the airspace, I could run down the Class D and some of the other ones real quick. Obviously Class D, I need 2-way radio communication.
Yeah.
So you need to be talking to me on the radio. Not necessarily need your mode C depending on where it's at. Now, Meacham is under a Bravo, so that's within that 30 nautical mile veil. So yes, you will need your mode C because of that, but not to necessarily talk to tower. Class B airspace, you need the clearance and two-way radio communication, and I think you need your transponder. Class C is two-way and radios, no, two-way radios and transponder. Class E, not much.
I don't think you need anything.
Class G, well, yeah, you can fly through E without talking to anyone. Now you kind of need your transponder on with the whole ADS-B thing moving forward. And Class G, obviously, you don't need any of that stuff. And Class A, IFR, obviously.
Yeah.
So, going back to the person flying in your airspace, I do see a question that says, how should a pilot handle a deviation? Well, based off of your story you just said last week when I was working, I felt kind of bad about it. But this guy was in a helicopter and he flew in, and yeah, there it is. Hey, that's actually my brother. Look at that. He flew into the airspace, and I saw him on the radar. I started calling out for him. Hey, aircraft north of Meacham, what are you doing? Aircraft north of Meacham. It was about 10 times. And finally, he got all the way to the downwind, and he turned around and tried to leave. And I'm like, and I saw the call sign. I had my binoculars, and I saw the call sign. And I'm like, hey, call sign. I won't say it on here. Call sign, November 12345. What are you doing? And he flew back a mile north. And I'm just like, oh dear. And it's lucky I had nothing going on, because if I would have had a pattern full of Cherokees, it would not have been good. And management does crack down on those kind of things. It depends on what's going on, but I had to deviate him. He flew all the way to my downwind without talking to me. And apparently the story later on was that he was on the wrong tower frequency. Meacham is next to Alliance, Navy, and a few other towers. So I could see that, but still, it's like, Meacham can be very busy at times. So he did his thing and then landed, and I had to deviate him. I had to take down his information, and he says, "Man, I'm so sorry. I've been flying for 40 years, and this has never happened. What should I do about this?" And I said, "Well, it's nothing to really worry about. It's more of a statistical thing at this point. As a controller, some people call us the police."
Yeah.
I've seen that. I can see that in both ways, honestly, because it's kind of like giving out a speeding ticket. That's kind of what I feel like when I'm doing that. But I'm not. All I'm doing is I'm telling you that something possibly happened. That's why it's called possible pilot deviation. Maybe you screwed up. That's obvious in some cases. But then I take your name and I take your number, and I have to fill out a report of what's going on, and then I have to submit that. And then once the pilot calls, we talk about it for a minute. Fly safe. It's like, no, I don't have hard feelings. People mess up. I do my best to try not to. Even I mess up sometimes. But they teach us as controllers early on, it's okay to mess up as long as you fix it real quick. Yeah. So how does he handle a deviation? I told him, I said, well, you may or may not hear from FSDO down the line. They may call you, ask you some questions, and just to log the statistic on what deviations are happening during deviations, because the airports use that for their runway safety meetings, and it lets pilots know what event occurred, and it's essentially a learning tool for them. So don't necessarily think of it as like the most horrible thing in the world. Just the first thing I would always recommend is if you get deviated, you fill out a NASA report as soon as you land.
Yes.
Yep. As soon as you land, do not even think about going to get ice cream or Mountain Dew or anything. Just go and fill out a NASA report, and then call the tower. And like I said, most of them will be nice with you. I've heard of some people that weren't so nice. I've had some people that weren't so nice to me. In the end, I'm just trying to do my job as safely as I can, and flying it all the way to my tower inside my airspace without talking to me is not the best thing. So I said, you may get a call, you may not. Just tell them what happened, fill out a NASA report, and learn from it and move forward.
Yeah.
That's the best thing you can do. I mean, some of those things that pilots do, whether they're deviation worthy or not, like landing on a runway with another airplane on it, the pilots are going to have enough to learn from that without a deviation. But the deviation is for the ATC aspect of it. So anyways, that one can kind of go on for forever and ever.
Oh, yes. No, it definitely can. And I just want to reemphasize the NASA report thing. It's important because the NASA report it is a way of self-reporting what happened, but it is anonymous. And the reason that they want the NASA report is simply to track issues, safety issues. If they see repeated issues in a certain area, they need to make a change. And like I said, it's anonymous. And then if the FSDO ever calls you, you can say, hey, I reported, here's my NASA report receipt. And everyone's happy inside of the end. So, well, may not be happy, and it depends on what you did, but always do that NASA report right away. It can definitely help you inside of the end. So
yes, and to touch ever so slightly on that, even controllers have that. It's called an ATSAP. So if we do something that may not have been in the best intentions, or even if if pilots do something. So if I had two pilots the other day, I had one. It was a runway incursion, and I had a guy taking off. So that kind of gave me shivers. But I had one offset, and everything was done correctly on my part. But I still went and filled out an ATSAP report. It's just like a NASA report, but it's for controllers as well. So we can all help from that. We can all learn from that.
Yeah, we all make mistakes. Okay, it happens, and reporting is better than you may think. Hiding, that's when you get in trouble.
Correct. Very correct.
I'm going to throw this one in here just because we want to take a stab at some other people. Thank you, Nathan.
Is it hard to control airspace with renegade pilots like Dan, Brian, and Christy? Ha ha, JK. Well,
Wait,
I've actually.
Ha ha, JK. Brian for sure.
Yeah, well, which Brian in this case? No, it's. I mean, yeah, if I'm telling a pilot to do something and they don't do it, yes. But luckily, in the case of Dan, Brian, and Christy, I have spoken to all of them on frequency, and they all have done exactly what I told them to. So we're all still good friends.
That's awesome. Geez. That's awesome. All right. I have a question for you, because I think that this would be a really good help us understand traffic controllers a little bit better. Have you ever had to work an emergency? And could you tell us a story about that?
Of course. Yes, I have worked many an emergency. Ever since I was in training and when I was in the military, we'd have anything from ground emergencies. And the military is a little different, but ground emergencies, air emergencies, off-field emergencies. Thankfully, in my career, I have not had to work any crashes. Thank God. Knock on wood. Yeah. I have had to work a forced landing, but yeah, most controllers are going to experience an emergency within the very first year of becoming a controller. One of the ones that I actually put on my channel was of a pregnant lady who came back in a Cherokee. She was on a cross country. I think she was building hours for the IFR, and she lost her brakes. So that video is over there if you want to listen on my channel. If you want to listen to the audio of it, I pulled it off of liveatc.net. See, you can use it for many things. And basically what I did, same thing I do with any emergency, is she's number one to the field, even if she's 20 miles away. Anybody else can move around as necessary. Now, in that case, 20 miles away, I can still do other work before she got there. So what I did with this lady in this case is I just I had her go to the downwind. I had her turn a nice wide base and a nice long final, and I told her treat it like a short field landing. If your brakes are legit out, then treat it like a short field landing. 1.6 at Meacham actually slopes down a degree, I think. So it was still winds. She had a good headwind that day, and so she was able to land and without brakes. And I told her to do a couple S turns on the runway just to maximize the distance, and she ended up using most of the runway. And maybe the circumstances could have been different. I've gotten a lot of feedback. Oh, she could have gotten off at midfield, or she could have done this, she could have done that. Well, and I go to those people and I say, listen, this is a pregnant lady, emergency, lost her brakes. What do you think she's thinking about? Obviously, she's flying an airplane. What do you think she's thinking about? Like, seriously. Anyways, she ended up being just fine. The airplane, the brakes were fixed immediately after the incident, and the plane works just fine now. She took a break from flying, though, I believe. But yeah, it's that she didn't need to declare either. All she had to do was call me on tower and say, my brakes don't work. And I declared it. So, on a subtopic, who can declare for you? I can declare as a controller. You can declare as the pilot. In the military, those responsible for the aircraft can declare. So, it's whoever needs to declare, honestly, in the end, I don't really care. It can be anyone. If there's a problem that exists and ATC can help, declare. Even if you're going to a non-controlled field, there's plenty of stories out there where someone had to declare and go to a non-controlled field, and they were talking to center, and center ended up relaying communications and getting fire and rescue out to that field. Luckily, in most of the cases, people landed okay and they were just fine. But in your mind as a pilot, some of us go immediately to worst case scenario, and controllers will understand that from time to time and will immediately try to reassure you that it's not worst case scenario because you're flying the airplane all the way to the crash. I say that because it's just a saying that I've heard, which don't let go of the yoke. Don't just stop flying because you want to give up. So
I can attest to that. Just yesterday, I kid you guys not, I was flying with someone, and my hangar mate right behind me. We're in the hangar row together. We taxied out together. We ran up together. I took off 2 minutes before him, and his engine failed after he took off. And he flew it all the way to the ground, and you can tell. Search rescue got there, ambulances got there, tried to medical attention. They didn't need it. If you want to survive, fly it to the ground. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox.
No, it's a good example, and I saw that picture. It looked like a pretty good landing.
Yes, incredible.
Airplane in one piece.
This is a fun one. I believe his name's Jesper. Jesper, I love you.
Has anyone buzzed the tower? Yeah, I know Jesper. What's up, Jesper? Has anyone buzzed the tower? Yes, many pilots have buzzed the tower. And in my humble opinion, not speaking for any agency or anything, I love when that happens. Yes, and we don't get a lot of buzzes from smaller, slower airplanes, but when the military guys come by, they'll do a little bit of something because why not? So. Oh, yeah, that's good.
We actually had a lot of people ask that, but Jesper was the first one. So do they usually ask you first permission to buzz the tower?
It varies. When I was in the military, I had a lot more of this. I had a lot of more military pilots buzzing the tower because they're military pilots and Top Gun. So it depends. We had a few things we could say that wasn't exactly approved because we weren't supposed to. But we would say, like, present position, closed traffic approved when they were, like, midfield. So they would just go, whoop, right over, and it'd be like, yes. Not too much of that in the GA world, though.
No, we're not fast enough. You'd be more like.
Yes, it's like, there they go. Yes.
All right. Here's a good one, because I've done this, and I did it when I was soloing as a student. Nathan asks, as a CFI or as an air traffic controller, we'll say here, do you get annoyed by people who ask to see the light gun signals?
Not at all. Now, I will tell you this. If I'm busy, I'll keep it civil for YouTube. If I'm busy and you can hear that I'm busy, maybe try not to ask that on that flight because you may get a quick sully, unable. If I've got nothing going on and you're coming back from a long cross country at night and you're like, hey, tower, if you're not busy, can we get the light gun? Crud you out. In a heartbeat. We have to test those things 2 or 3 times daily anyways. So why the heck not?
No, and if you've never been hit by the light signal and it's calm, definitely do it. Even after your flight, you can contact ground and say, hey, would you mind hitting me with the light signal? And they know where you are. They just told you where to go. And they'll hit you with the light signal. And it's good to see it during the day. You'll definitely notice at night. You cannot miss it at night, but definitely ask for it during the day. Oh,
you froze up there. Don't confuse it with the beacon, though. I've had that happen. Ethan Jones knows exactly what I'm talking about if he's watching. Dan does too.
So, okay.
What else do y'all got? I got a lot of good questions tonight.
We've had a couple.
I'm looking over here. Yeah, I know. I'm looking to my other screen because I'm looking at all the questions. I guess they're right here as well.
We have a good question here. It disappeared because there have been stuff. There it is. He had 2 questions. This is a good one. ATC have some procedures for non-native English speakers. If you're having a hard time communicating with them, what do you do?
We basically have to just slow down and talk real slow. No, there's no specific procedure. English, even though it's the international language of air traffic for ICAO, most countries that are ICAO, they'll run at least English. I know in Mexico they'll do English and Spanish. When I was in the UAE, they would run English and I think it was Arabic, something like that. I don't know exactly the language or the name of it, but they would run both. But no special procedures. I mean, if we hear an accent or we hear that you're struggling, we'll pretty much just slow down and try to give you the slowest instructions we can. Now, in the middle of my pattern, if I'm busy, I may not be able to do that, so keep that in mind. But for the most part, we'll just slow it down. No specific procedure written that I'm aware of. If there is, like I said, I don't know.
My school is airport is a very heavily training school for international students. And I can say, because I've heard this, there's language barriers all the time. And in a situation where someone was calling, trying to come inbound and land at the airport, the controller could not talk to him, could not understand him. And he was obviously flying either on a solo or with another international student, building some time or doing something, and didn't have the time to talk slow and just told him, remain outside class Delta. I'll call you back in 5 minutes.
It can happen.
It happens. And so definitely proficiency inside of English. It's the first requirement. No, age is the first requirement. The second requirement for your private pilot certificate is English.
Yeah. We also have a foreign school at Meacham, and for the most part they do pretty well. It's just that language barrier that they got to get over right off the bat. I mean, they're learning English and they're learning how to fly, so bravo to them. But even then, we still got to talk slow sometimes, and that goes for anyone, not just that school.
Yeah. All right. Dion has another question for us. Do ultralight pilots have to talk to ATC? And his channel is the Flying Controller.
Thank you. Ultralight pilots have to talk to ATC. If you are, I'd have to look in the book for this one, so don't quote me. But if you're in my airspace, I'm pretty sure you need to be talking to me.
Mm-hmm.
If you are flying anything in my airspace, whether it's a hot air balloon or whatever, if it goes off the ground, short of a car off of a bridge, you better be talking to me. Same thing with Bravo airspace, Charlie airspace, Deltas, Echoes not necessarily. And then if you get up to Alpha, let me know.
In an ultralight, yes.
Yeah.
And survive.
Right. Yeah. Let me know how that works. But yes, you do need to be talking in the appropriate airspace. You do need to be communicating as appropriate.
Now let me piggyback on that question right there. What if it is an ultralight trying to come land and they actually don't have a tail number? I feel like there's some rules or regulations on that.
That's an interesting question.
Because not all of them are registered with N numbers.
I didn't know. I haven't really messed with a lot of ultralights. The slowest thing I've controlled was a blimp. It was a blimp.
You controlled a blimp.
I controlled a blimp. Yes, and it took him about 30. No, it took him about 45 minutes to land. That was a fun day. I didn't have anything else going on, so it was good. But that's a good question. I honestly don't know the answer to that. I would guess that they'd have to get a call sign and register. I'm not sure. I couldn't speak to that.
I was just reading about it recently, a handful of things, but even people with like the motor parachute, what are those called?
Paraglider?
Yeah, paragliders. It's like, are they allowed to come land at airports? I honestly, I don't know, because I know they don't have to have a pilot certificate.
If they have two-way radio communications with a Class D, I don't see why not. But like I said, it depends on where that Class D is. If it's within a 30 nautical mile veil.
This is opinion. We don't really know.
Yeah, I honestly don't know. I couldn't speak to that. That's an interesting question, though.
Yeah, no, definitely. Here's one. Do you have any airline stuff happening at your airport?
We don't have any scheduled air service at Meacham, but we do have a few airplanes that come in, Part 121 rules, and they go to the paint shop. We have a paint shop at Meacham, and a lot of the new Boeing 767s and 787s, they'll come and land at Meacham, and they'll go to the paint shop. And that's about the only 121 operation that we mess with.
Okay. The reason I ask is John Miller was just, do you have any frustrations dealing with airline crews and those types of things? So
not a lot. And I don't really, I mean, if the crew is just the pilot and the co-pilot, then I guess not. I mean, just No, I guess not. I couldn't say anything to that.
Okay. I'm sure you're looking at the questions too.
Yeah, I'm glancing over, just seeing what I can see. But yeah, throw one up there. Let's see.
This will be a good one. We can both answer it. How do you envision the return of aviation in the coming weeks? I can tell you, I live in the traffic pattern for my airport. I've seen fewer aircraft, but there are still a lot of aircraft in my area. So the real question should be, do we see a return to airliners, passenger flying like that? I think training is still happening. I think flights are still going on, especially inside of general aviation. I don't think we're going to see that go away terribly too much, in my opinion.
That's a good way to phrase it. And I also live right on the base leg to my airport, so I see them all the time. It seemed like whenever they started off with that 14-day rule, that some people took it to heart, and we were like dead for like a couple weeks. But immediately following that, Meacham's numbers started climbing back up, and we were doing like 1,000+ ops a day. It dropped to about 200 something when the COVID started, and then after that 14 days, it jumped back up. I mean, I've gone to work these days, and I've had a busy pattern just like normal. And
awesome.
I'm like, perfect.
No, it's good.
As for the airlines, it's great. I love it. I keep the rust off. As for the airlines, I'm not sure. I don't know if I could speak to that one. I would hope that they could all resume normally, but it's obvious that that's probably not going to be the case with all the damage that this has done. So it'll probably be a slow, gradual, get back to normal thing, and it could take 6 months to a year to 2 years. I'm not an expert on that one. I couldn't tell you. I'd probably agree with Carl more than anything.
Yeah, I think GA is going to come good and strong, but the airlines might be a question. All right, here's a good one. Do you think more air traffic control communications should be automated or electronically transmitted in the future to avoid mistakes and free up pilots? I'm going to add something to this for you. Do you think remote controlling? Let's say you have a radar, can you control another field from 100 miles away?
So whether it's automated or electronically transmitted, it's still built by a human. So it's still bound to make mistakes. I know that they're doing that remote ATC thing. Was it in Europe somewhere? I forgot exactly. They're already trying that thing where they're controlling fields a far ways away. And that only works to an extent. I've seen that, and I'm like, I personally wouldn't venture into that territory, because you can miss so many things. Cameras only do so much for you. I know you can recreate the tower and all that in a bag of chips, but I don't think it's the best idea. Of course, that could change in 50 years. It's like automated airplanes at this point. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't think a computer can have the instinct and the reaction time maybe, but the instinct of a pilot, like, oh, my ailerons don't work. Okay, I know what's wrong. A computer, it could be, minutes before it figures that out. I mean, or they make them to where they're really good. I don't know, but I don't think that. No.
I think for the same reason that we won't ever see the front of the plane empty. We're always going to have pilots up there, because the decision making and the reaction times of things that need to happen, we need a human there taking care of it, making sure it's happening as it should be. So, all right, we've already answered this question, but I saw him in the comments, so we're going to answer it again. I don't know how to say your name. The answer is yes. You can say again, or speak slower.
Is it okay to ask ADC to talk a little slower sometimes? Yes. Just don't do it more than twice at the same time. Jeez. Yes, right. We are people just like you are. So just doing a job.
All right. So we're getting close to an hour here, which I decided we would wrap up then. But let's end on this one. I like this question. Simple question.
What's your favorite part about your job?
Yep.
My favorite part about my job is when I have airplanes to control. So when I'm sitting there without any airplanes, it's kind of boring. But I love the chaos when there's lots of airplanes moving within a tight space, and I'm orchestrating it all. I think that's what gets me most excited. So I offer free touch and goes. That kind of helps.
Free touch.
Yeah.
I love it. Great.
I just like it when it's busy.
Well, Matt, thank you. Thank you very much for being a part of this, answering our questions. We had some fun ones, some things that I didn't even think to ask. So thank you again.
Well,
if you want to follow Matt, you can follow him on YouTube, The Flying Controller. He's got a YouTube channel. He's got one very good famous video on there that you may have seen inside of the past. And I think it's a featured video. So definitely go check that out. And as always, guys, thank you. Thank you so much for watching, contributing, and following us. So share aviation wherever you can, and we'll see you in the next one.
Peace. See ya.